Hi all, a very good morning. So in our yesterday's class, we were able to look through the first part to introduction to the EC2. EC2, as we know, is Elastic Cloud Compute, or the place where we can actually launch our virtual servers. So in the EC2 section of our course, first part we learned is about the what are the basic components of a computer. So basically, any computer or any virtual server will have 6 important components: operating system, CPU, RAM, hard disk, network card, and the security. So these are the 6 important parts that are required for any op EC2 instance. So now, after that, we were also able to look through what are the different options available in the EC2. So we have on-demand instances, we have reserved, and then we have the spot instances. We learned about the use case of each of them, on what point of time we use each of them. So specifically, if I talk about the on-demand, we are paying fixed rate per hour, right? And specifically, I do not have any commitment. As long as I want to use, I would use, and I'm going to pay it by hourly rate. And in terms of reserved instances, if I know that I have a reservation of specific capacity for at least for 2 years or 3 years from today, I'm going to specifically pay them on the basis of 1 or 3 years, and then I'll get a significant cost saving when compared to the on-demand instances. And in terms of spot instances, specifically we are placing a price bid, and if our price bid matches with what Amazon is offering it, we are going to get that specific capacity for as a spot instance, and we are going to pay the price of what we have bid for. So whenever we have a flexible start time or end time, we specifically move on for the spot instances. So in spot instances, the major advantage would be I am going to get a very heavy machine at a very cheaper rate. So specifically, if you're looking for machines like more than 200 plus GB of RAM, then you can actually think for going for spot instances, because you do that spot instances for very cheaper rate. So this was one of the diagram which helps us actually to let us know how the spot instance prices are moving up and down. So this was specifically drawn for one of the region, that is US East one, in which we have around 6 availability zones, but we have captured the data for the 4 of them here. So for the specific operating system, specific size of the machine, we have specifically got this diagram which shows how the spot instance prices keep moving in and around. Now, when would you use specifically the on-demand? So let's say whenever I have got a Black Friday sale or a Big Billion Day sale coming up like this, anyway, my servers are always up and running. But apart from that, I would require additional capacity in order to serve the end users. That is when I will add the on-demand instances for maybe a couple of days. Like again today, I guess the Flipkart has got sale. So what would have they done? They would have anyway got the normal servers, but apart from that, they have the sale for 2 days. So they are going to add this on-demand instances for the 2 days, and then once the work is done, they are going to remove this on-demand instances. So applications with short term, so this has been short term, spiky or unpredictable workloads that cannot be interrupted. And even if the applications are being developed or tested by the development or testing team, on-demand instances are the better ones to go with. Reserved instances are basically where I know that I'm going to continue as my e-commerce website maybe for a couple of years, or maybe as an application I want to host it here, right? So I'm sure that my application is going to run for a few years together, like Flipkart or Facebook or anything as such. As we all know, they are consistently working to make the place better. So they are going to stay in the market for at least few years from today, right? So they would specifically opt for the reserved instances so that they get a significant cost savings because they are anyway making upfront payment for the capacity that is required. And then the spot instances, as we know, it is basically working on the bid price. So we can go ahead and place a bid and we can get the instance of a very heavy size for the low compute pricing, and we can start at our own flexibility in terms of the spot instance. And remember, in terms of the spot instance, if you are going to terminate the instance from your side, if you think your work is done and if you are going to terminate the EC2 instance, then you will be charged for that specific hour. But if the bid price has moved up and the Amazon has closed that EC2 instance, then you will not be charged for any partial hour of usage. And now we are going to look in at what are the different types of EC2 instances. Basically, we call them as a families. Now, depending upon the different case of usage, we have different family. Like specifically, if you want heavy compute machine where you want to utilize a heavy CPU, then you would go for specifically like C4. If you want to have a heavy memory based machines, you can go for R4. Right? If you have heavy graphic based machines where you have the video encoding, 3D applications or movies, heavy high quality movies streaming, then you specifically go for G2, right? Similarly, we have got all the different families here. So we have D2, R4, M4, C4, G2, I2, F1, T2, P2 and X1. Now each of them have a specialty. Like if I talk about the D, that is for dense storage. Now what is the use case? Specifically, we have, if we have data warehousing or Hadoop where we require immense calculations happening at a very faster rate, right? So I would specifically go for dense storage, right? So Hadoop, and we all know that that works on HDFS, that is Hadoop file system, which requires a little faster rate of transacting and storing the data in the backend systems. We would specifically go for the D2 machines. Then we have R4, that is memory optimized. So applications wherever you have heavy memory usage, you can think about R4. M4 is basically general purpose. So any machines with the M are basically our general purpose machines. So in terms of M, we are basically using it for general purpose machines. Like if you're not sure where to start with, M4 are the best machines to start with. And yeah, for the basic applications, for just for testing, we are going to use the T2, that is the lowest cost general purpose. And if you really want to put it in the production to start with, we go with M4 machines. So if you are not sure where to start with, because initially we may have to first generate and see how our application is going through, what is it basically difficult facing the difficulties with. Maybe within several months, when we come to know the better performance, we can shift out to any of the other machines. So in case for just for testing purpose and the development purpose, we usually go with the T2, that is the lowest cost. And in case of the normal applications that get hosted on the AWS, they are basically mostly done on the M4. And after that, if you think you are more popular like Amazon or Flipkart or Paytm, then maybe you can think about going for a little heavier machine. And in case if you have very heavy computing required, then you can opt for C4, that is compute optimized, where you have the applications which utilize a lot of CPU. In terms of G2, that is basically for graphic intensive, It is basically used for video encoding or the 3D application streaming. And then we have I2. I2 specifically works with IOPS, that is IOPS. IOPS is nothing but input output per second, right? So in case if you think you require a very heavy IOPS, that is input output per second, you specifically go for this high speed storage where you have the NoSQL DBs and the data warehousing tools. And F1 is basically in terms you want to connect your instance with your hardware devices like IoT and do some special cases, you can go for field programmable gate array. This was introduced in last year's AWS reInvent, the machine with type F1. And then we have the lowest cost general purpose, that is T2. And then P2 basically is for machine learning Bitcoin mining. Now we all know that Bitcoin mining is really a thing that is going to pick up in the market in the next upcoming days. Basically mining is like authorizing the transaction across, right? But they require very heavy machines, so we might have to choose something like P2, which is we'll just see in next few minutes what is the minimum size that comes for the P2, that is mostly dealing with a lot of heavy graphics. And then X1, if you think you want really a heavy memory, then go for the X1 based machines where you can actually put through your SAP HANA or Apache Spark, which require minimum of 244 GB of RAM, right? So in X1 we start with minimum of 200 plus GB of RAM, and you will be able to apply it for your application. Now you might be wondering how to remember all of this. Yeah, we'll also look for those things on what basis they are being charged or what happens with this. So in order to remember these, just think about this cricket ground. This is a cricket ground which is in the Melbourne, and there is some dirt on this specific cricket ground. So this is currently dirty, and this is a Melbourne cricket ground. So there is a small acronym which can help you to remember the different types of instances, that is dirt MCG, that is dirty Melbourne cricket ground, and FPX. So FPX initially was not there. In last year in the reInvent, all these three were added, that is FPX. So I've just added the acronym FPX at the behind the scene. So dirt MCG FPX. So dirt is D stands for dense, I is for IOPS, R is for RAM, T is for T2 micro or something as such, which is for cheap general purpose. M is mainly what we use for the applications, and C is for compute, G is for graphics, F is for field programmable gate array, P is for heavy graphics. So you can think about the pictures, and X is for extreme memory. Or you can also remember this with the acronym of Dr. Mac Gift PX, DRMC Gift PX, that is Dr. Mac Gift PX. So D, as I said, is for density, R for RAM, M main choice for general purpose, C for compute, G for graphics, I for IOPS, F for FPGA, T is for cheap general purpose, P is for graphics, and X is for extreme memory. So that was all about the different instance types. Now each of the instance types have a different pricing scenario. Now if we talk about the pricing scenario here, let me take it down to the services, and then we'll go down to the EC2 section. I'm going to click on launch instance. So in the second step, we basically get to choose the family, that is how many virtual cores of CPU and how much memory of RAM is specifically available for each type. Just now we learned about the different types. So if you see, minimum starts with the T2 Nano, that is having one virtual core of CPU and 0.5 GB of RAM. Now if I scroll down a little more, you see the next option, free tier eligible. So as a part of our free tier eligibility for AWS account for 1 year, you will be able to easily play around with this T2 micro, in which we get one virtual core of CPU and 1 GB of RAM. So apart from that, even if you select general purpose T2 Nano, you're going to be charged for that. So always select the option which is part of your free tier eligibility. Similarly, if you scroll down, you'll be able to see all the different machines with the different capacity. Now, T2 small comes with one virtual core of CPU, 2 GB of RAM. Medium comes with two virtual cores of CPU, 4 GB of RAM, and the size increases basically. And then we have M4, as I said, after the T2, where we are actually going to develop the applications on T2 based machines. Once it is developed, then specifically we look for either T2 large to host the applications in the production environment, or we go for the M4 large. And if you go scroll down a little more, you will get the machines based on the compute optimized or the GPU optimized. As such, in the GPU optimized, you see here P2 8x large comes with 488 GB of RAM, and then we have 16x large that comes with the 732 GB of RAM and 64 virtual cores of CPU. If I scroll down a little more, I'll be able to see all the different types of machines. So based upon the machine that I'm going to select, I'm going to be charged separately. So each of them has a different charge. Specifically, like X132X large will have a different one because this has got 1952 GB of RAM along with 128 virtual cores of CPU. So these are all the different kind of machines. i3, D2, X1, right? We just learned that is DIRT, MCG, FPX. So all the different types of machines are basically contained here in this second page of our instance where we are going to launch it. Now, in terms of calculating the prices, we have, you can just go down to Google and then just say AWS calculator. So it's going to give you the first link for the AWS calculator. Just open it up. Now let's say I'm trying to use EC2, and currently let's say I'm going to pick up the Mumbai region where we are going to launch our virtual servers. You can go ahead and add here which kind of instance are you planning to use across. Right here it says Linux on T1 micro, so you can go ahead and select this. So maybe I would like to use, let's say, C4 large, which has got two virtual cores of CPU and 3.7 gigs of RAM. So here he does ask you which operating system you are going to use through, and then say close and save. So it is going to show you what is the average monthly cost for this. So if you're going to go with on-demand instance, then you're going to pay $80 per month. Now let's say if I want to use the same machine for 1 year continuously, let's check out what happens. Here it is. So 1 year, no upfront reserved or partial upfront. So if I'm going to pay everything at this moment of time itself, so if I go ahead and select this and say close and save, it is going to show me the cost. 1 sec. Yeah, so the effective monthly cost will be $50.84. So you see, if I go for on demand, the costing is $80, and if I go for 1 year upfront payment, I get it for $50.84, right? So specifically my cost is reducing a lot, right? So if I know that my servers are going to run for years together, I can specifically go for this reserved instances, so where I can reserve the capacity. Now if you go for 3 years all upfront, then you specifically are paying only $40, $40.31 itself. Now we also have something called as reserved and convertible. If you say reserved, which means it is going to be reserved for this specific capacity only, C4 large. If you launch any other machine apart from C4 large, then you're going to be charged across. That's why we have something called as convertible as well. So if you talk about convertible, then you can move around anywhere in the C4 machines. So that is basically the convertible type. So I'll quickly go ahead and close this. So this AWS S3 AWS calculator is handy to help you out with any kind of service that we are dealing with, right? So it actually helps us to give an estimation of a complete costing on whichever we are going to go through, right? So if I am going to select, let's say on demand, so it is showing that it is going to cost me $80 per hour on a C4 large. And then it also asks me if you have any specific volumes, what is the size, how much data transfer you are going to use, if you are going to have load balancers, everything is. Then then you can check out this part where it is going to show you complete billing section on how the billing is going to happen. And now it's time to introduce our block-based storage. So we learned a very detailed about what is object-based storage, what is S3, and how does it work on the AWS cloud. Now we can start learning about what is block-based storage, that is EBS, that the name expands to Elastic Block Store. So EBS stands for Elastic Block Store, where I can actually go ahead and install or run my operating system. I can run other softwares and I can play around with this device. So Amazon EBS allows you to create storage volumes and attach them to the EC2 instances. So once attached, you can create a file system on top of these volumes, run a database, or use them in any way you use a block device. Right, so I'll be able to use the EBS volumes as a part of my block device and run across my softwares and the operating systems. Amazon EBS volumes are placed in a specific availability zone where they are automatically replicated to protect you from the failure of a single component. Now when we talk about the EBS, they are placed in a availability zone. Right, now if you talk about the S3, S3 is placed in a specific region. Now in a region, if I have got 3 availability zones, automatically 1 copy of data is stored in all 3 availability zones, which means it is creating 3 copies in the backend. But it is not the case with EBS. In case of EBS, we are going to place the data in a specific availability zone, right? So if that availability zone goes down, then my data is not available for that specific period of time. So in terms of EBS, they are availability zone specific, but in terms of S3, they are region specific. Now let's learn what are the different types of EBS. So specifically in the types of the EBS, let me put across specifically in types of the EBS, that is Elastic Block Store. We have SSD. Now SSD stands for solid state drive. And the second is magnetic. So we all have been using the devices of both the types, SSDs and the magnetics. So most of the mobile phones today come with the SSD device types. That is the reason they are little costlier. Specifically, if you talk about the iPhone or the high-end Samsung devices, they all work on the SSD, that is solid state drive, and that is the reason they are little costlier in the pricing. So SSD is basically a type of storage, block-based storage, which is little faster, and specifically your data will not lag. So if you have seen any iPhone, that is from iPhone 3 or iPhone 4, 5, 6, 7, and today it's 8 and iPhone X has been launched. So all of them basically work on the SSD drives. That is the major reason why these systems do not lag or do not hang across, because they specifically use SSD drives behind the scene, and SSD drives are known for the performance and the faster response. So in case if you have got a Windows laptop, and maybe in case if you're planning to purchase it in near future, just give a try for the SSD drives for the root volume. Of course, SSD drives are a little costlier when compared to magnetic. Now comparing the cost here, 1 TB of magnetic drive can usually come down for the 4,000 rupees, Indian rupees. And similarly, if you go for the SSD drive, that can cost you just 128 or 256 GB. If you go for just a 128 or 256 GB of SSD drive, that basically comes at around 4,000 INR. So the cost is a little heavier, but the performance wise it's much better. So if you are trying to host your Windows operating system on your normal magnetic drive of 1 TB, and your laptop might take, let's say, 2 minutes to switch it on, the moment you switch it, you go down to SSD drive, it will just take 45 seconds to 1 minute. So you can just imagine the amount of time that is being reduced by using the SSD drives. The systems boot up much faster because the way the storage is being arranged in the SSD drives in terms of blocks is better when compared to the magnetic drives. Now let's look the different kinds of EBS storages that we have in the AWS cloud. So specifically we have two types, that is SSD and magnetic. Again in the SSD they have two different types, that is IO1 and the GP2. And in terms of magnetic we have three different types, that is ST1, SC1 and the magnetic standard. Now what is IO1 GP2? We are going to learn about that in very little time. Now in terms of SSD drives, we measure the speed by IOPS, that is input output per second. Now in terms of magnetic drives, as you all know, we measure the speed in MB per second. How many MBs are being transferred per second. Okay, so talking about the first one, that is IO1. IO1 is basically provisioned IOPS, as we call it as. So it is designed for heavy intensive input output applications such as large relational databases or NoSQL databases. So I would use it specifically when I require more than 10,000 IOPS. So IO1 is specifically used where you require more than 10,000 IOPS and less than 20,000 IOPS. And if you talk about the GP2, that is the most widely used across general purpose SSD drive. So if you want to start with a normal SSD drive in our normal AWS cloud, we would use general purpose SSD, which starts with 0 to up to 10,000 of IOPS. And in terms of magnetic, so for any normal general purpose, we would specifically use this GP2, that is general purpose SSD drive. And if you have a special requirement, we'll specifically go for the provisioned IOPS SSD drives. And in terms of ST1, SC1, ST1 basically stands for the throughput optimized hard disk drive. So it is basically used for big data, data warehousing tools, log processing and other places. But remember, it cannot be used as a boot volume. Similar is the case with the SC1. It cannot be used as a boot volume, but it is a very lowest cost of storage for the infrequently accessed workloads. Like we have in S3 infrequent access. Similarly, in terms of EBS, if you think about infrequent access workloads, you can go for the cold HDD, that is cold hard disk drive, with the name SC1. So in terms of SC1 and ST1, SC1 stands for throughput, optimized. SC1 stands for cold. HDD is basically hard disk drive, and remember both SC1 and ST1 cannot be used as a boot volume. Boot volume is basically as a operating system where the main operating system is installed, right? So if I'm installing operating system in the ST1 and SC1, it is not possible at all. And then the magnetic standard is basically the lowest cost per gigabyte of all the EBS volume type, that is bootable. So I can actually install the operating system on top of this. Magnetic volumes are ideal for the workloads where the data is accessed infrequently and applications where the lowest storage cost is important. So if you're really thinking about the perspective of the storage, then specifically we can go for the magnetic standard. Now again, looking back at our calculator, if you look through in the EC2 section, we do have here about the volumes that we are going to use. So specifically, if I'm putting, let's say 1 TB, let's say if I'm putting it 100 GB here, so it is going to give me how much cost it can go through. So here I'll just remove this. So here it shows 100 GB of general purpose SSD drive is going to cost you $7.98, removing the amount for the free tier. So free tier is going to give you a discount of $3.42 here. And if I go further, let's say same with the magnetic drive, 100 GB, then you see your cost has drastically reduced. It has come down to $5.60, right? Out of which 2.40 are being removed as a part of free tier. So basically it is costing you $8 in terms of magnetic drive, and in terms of the SSD drives, it is going to cost you $11. So those are the different types of all the EC2 instances. Now we are actually ready to go ahead and launch our first EC2 instance, or first virtual machine we can call it as. So let's get started with it. Now when I go down to the AWS home screen, so until now we have learned about the two services. First of them is IAM, which is a part of security. Second is basically about the S3, which is a part of storage. Right now, whenever we had been inside the IAM section, or whenever we had been inside the S3 section, so whenever we go inside the specific section, you see basically it is going to show you global here, right? So which means IAM does not require a region selection. So whatever user or whatever role or whatever group I'm going to create, it can be used across any service, any region in the AWS. SC1 is specifically used for the infrequently accessed workloads, where you think your files are not accessed every day and the lowest storage cost is important. You go for the SC1. And ST1 is specifically for log processing, data warehousing tools, where you think again SSD drives are going to cost you a little higher. Comparatively, you will go for the ST1, that is throughput optimized hard disk drive. So we were discussing about the IAM. So specifically IAM does not require any region selection, and it is global. So whatever I create here, it can be used across any service, right? So if I create a role, I want to attach it to, let's say, CloudTrail, I can do it. If I want to attach it to storage gateway, I can do it. If I want to attach to code commit, I'll be able to do through, right? So I'll be able to attach the role across to any one of the services. So that's why it is basically a global service. Now when we talk about the S3, again, S3 is a global service. But whenever I'm creating a bucket, it is asking me specifically the region in which this bucket is going to get created, right? So specifically my bucket is going to be a part of specific region, that is Mumbai or Singapore or North Virginia. And whatever data I'm going to store in S3 bucket, automatically the data will be stored across all the availability zones in that region. So if it is a Mumbai, I have 2 availability zones. If it is North Virginia, I have got 6 availability zones. So whatever data I'm going to store up in this bucket, automatically it is going to create 6 copies of this in behind the scenes. We'll not be able to see all the 6 copies, but yes, there will be 6 copies behind the scenes. So if any one of the availability zone goes down, still my data will be available for the access. But now when we come down to the EC2 section, that is not the case. So specifically, I have to select a region where I'm going to launch my virtual servers or machines. So specifically, I have to select a region. I'll go ahead and select the Asia Pacific Mumbai as a region, and now I'm going to select on EC2 section here. So there we go. This is the dashboard that usually appears up for the EC2 section. Now we are in the Mumbai region, and this is a part of my Mumbai region. So if you see the first part that is about the dashboard, it is basically showing if I have any running instances, if I have any other things which are already in my AWS console for the EC2. So currently it says I do not have any running instances. So instance here is basically termed for the virtual machine or a server. We call it as instance, INSTANCE, that is running instance, right? So currently I do not have any instance running here, and I just have got some security groups, some key pairs, that's it. And if I scroll the page a little down, it does show me how to start with the launching an EC2 instance or creating a first virtual server. And below that we have something called a service health. So it is basically showing how is the health of my region at this moment of time. So Asia Pacific Mumbai is currently operating normal. There's no problem with the health of this region. As well as in this specific region we have two availability zones, and both of them are operating very normal at this moment of time. It is AP South 1A and AP South 1B. And in case if there is any maintenance period that is going to come up for this specific region, it will be shown up here in the scheduled events. So this is about the dashboard of a specific EC2 console, where it shows what all are the resources that you already launched up, what is the current status of them, and you can go ahead and create directly from here the new virtual machine. And you can also get started with by looking at the service health, if the region and the availability zones are operating normally or not. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the launch instance. So while I do that, I'll just go ahead and also open up this specific diagram so that we can easily relate it. Okay, so now the first very important thing of any computer or a virtual machine will be operating system. So let's go ahead and select the operating system. So the very first page that you see here is choose an AMI. AMI is nothing but Amazon Machine Image. So machine image is basically a template that contains software configuration, right? So it has some pre-installed softwares along with the operating system. Or if you just want a plain operating system, even that will be easily available here. Like if you want to go for Ubuntu, which is a just plain operating system, if you want to go for just Microsoft 2016 base, you will get it across. Now if you want along with the SQL Server, Microsoft Windows 2016, then this has got a SQL Server pre-installed in it, right? So you can specifically opt whether you want to go for a plain operating system or a machine which has got operating system along with some applications pre-installed inside that. So you can select an AMI provided by AWS user community or the AWS marketplace. So we here, if you look at, you have different options from where you can select an AMI. Now as a part of quick start, it is going to show you the most popularly used Amazon machine images. And if you click on the free tier, it is just going to show you the images which are available as a part of free tier. And if you go down to my AMIs, if you create your own machine image, you will be able to see your AMI in this specific section. And if you go to the marketplace, in the marketplace you can go ahead and purchase the machine images. So specifically the companies like Barracuda, Splunk, SAP, they have their own products available in the AWS marketplace. So what they have done, they have actually picked up one base machine from the Amazon AWS, like let's say Ubuntu. On top of it, they have installed their softwares like Splunk or maybe the SAP. Just let me show you for SAP. So there you go, right? So this is specifically a SUSE Linux, on top of which SAP applications has been pre-installed. Now, if you want to see the specific costing of this, it says that it starts from 0.38. Let me show you if I can check out. Yeah, so here it is going to show you what is the specific cost depending upon the type of machine I'm going to select for this AMI. So if I'm going to use this AMI, I'm going to pay for the software cost as well, because SAP is not free. So I'm going to pay the cost specifically $0.96 per hourly basis. And on top of it, my EC2 instance is going to be charged based upon the type. So if you are going for the T2 large, it is going to charge you $0.115. And specifically, we will not be able to install SAP application on the T2 micro, which is very small machine, right? So the lowest cost as far as I see here is with the T2 large, which is $0.115. So it is going to be a total of $0.495 per every single hour if I'm going to select this specific machine. And again, we have community AMIs. So if you want to create your own AMI and make it public across for all the people to use, you can go to the community AMIs. So in community AMIs, you will be able to see that a lot of people have made their AMIs publicly available for usage. So specifically in the community AMI, you get a wide options of choosing from which operating system you want to go ahead for, or which architecture you want to go for, whether it's 32-bit or 64, or you want to go for Windows, OpenSUSE, Gentoo, Fedora, Debian, or which of them you would like to go for, right? So you can select specifically any of this operating system from the community AMI. So we are going to get started with a quick start here, and I'm going to select the free tier. And what we are going to choose is Amazon Linux AMI in our case, that is a flavor of Linux specifically prepared by Amazon. So it's a very simple plain machine on the CentOS. They have actually, if you see here, the Amazon Linux AMI is EBS backed, AWS supported image, and the default image includes the tools like Python, Ruby, Perl, Java, and the repositories include Docker, PHP, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and other packages. So a lot of things are pre-installed for us if you are trying to use the Amazon Linux AMI. So I'm just going to go ahead and select this one at this moment of time. It is basically a flavor of CentOS on top of which Amazon has configured some softwares. Now I'm going to select T2 micro here. As we all know, choosing an instance type. So here in this case, I'm going to go ahead and look out for the CPU and the RAM configuration. So we are successfully able to select the operating system. The second is CPU and the RAM. So as a part of instance family, we get an option here to select which family it is going to belong to. Now, since we are part of a free tier AWS account, I'm going to select the general purpose T2 micro here, which has got one virtual core of CPU, 1 GB of RAM, and go ahead and say next, configure instance details. Now we are going to configure the instance details here. So if you remember, why do we use a network card? Network card is specifically required in order to get my computer or a virtual server connected to the internet. So here is a place where I'm going to configure the instance details, where I am going to define about my network options. So if you see here the network, it says it is a part of default VPC. Now we are going to learn about the VPC section in detail, how to create your own virtual private cloud as a part of networking. But until we are going to go to that section, we are going to make use of this default VPC. Remember, each region, the number of regions that we have, each of the region has got one default VPC available as provided by the Amazon AWS cloud. So we can make use of that default VPC for now. However, we are going to learn how to create your own virtual private cloud in the upcoming sessions as well. So in the terms of network, currently I'm going to choose default VPC as that is the only one available. And as we all know, in Mumbai, we have two availability zones, that is AP South 1A and AP South 1B. So it's going to ask you, where would you like to launch this instance into, AP South 1A or 1B? Let's say I'll just put it as 1A. Then it is going to ask me if you are going to assign a public IP address. The whole and sole purpose of this specific is a network card, right? We want to be able to connect our virtual machine with the internet. So I would say yes, enable this public IP assignment, because if public IP is available for this specific machine, then we will be able to log in into this machine from our normal Windows laptop or a computer from our place. Now the first part, if you see here, it says number of instances. So how many instances would you basically require with the same configuration? If you want to have a 10 different machines of the same AMI and the same instance type to be launched all together, you can actually put here number 10. However, as a part of our lab, for now I'll just put it as 1. So I'm going to launch one instance. And if you are going for a spot instance, you can specifically look on for this request for spot instance, and it's going to show you what is the current pricing of a spot instance at this moment of time. So usually for the T2 micro, they do not show spot instances as a part of free tier, but maybe they have recently started up this one. So in the AP South 1A, currently the pricing is 0.0064 USD, and in AP South 1B it is 0.0067 USD. And you can put your bid price here. Maybe let's say I'm looking for a bid price of $0.0060, and this request is going to be persistent. And interruption behavior, as we all know, whether it should stop or terminate. So it should be basically terminate, because if Amazon, if you want to, yeah, so currently it says hibernate behavior is not available. So I guess the Amazon is really making a lot of changes in terms of the spot instances. So earlier the interruption behavior was only the terminate, and now currently we also have got this option with a stop and the hibernate, which are available, which means at least our data will be little safe whenever the pricing bid price is going to move up. And the request valid time, so you can give your valid time here. Maybe I just want to give this request for the next 5 hours, let's say. So I'll just say it as, I just put the time. So this is how I can request for a spot instance. So for now I'll just disable this, because we are just going to launch it as a part of free tier. So if you go for spot instance, you'll have to pay the price. Anyway, as a part of our free tier, we are going to get this EC2 instance, which is of type T2 micro for free. So as a part of free tier, we are going to get 750 hours of EC2 instance for free usage. So I'm going to help you how do we calculate that ahead. So the next is IAM role. So now, as I said, we can actually assign the roles to the AWS services. Here you get an option to assign the roles. Okay, so we are going to learn in detail how to play around with the roles in the lab section in upcoming days. And then next is shutdown behavior. So whenever you say shut down to this specific system, what should happen? Whether it should stop or whether it should terminate. When I say stop, it is basically shutting down the system, and the system is still in my AWS account itself. When I say terminate, I'm returning back the virtual machine to the AWS cloud itself, right? So if you think you are all done with the server, you do not require it anymore, and you want to nil the costs on your AWS account, then you can go ahead and say shutdown behavior as terminate. But however, it is recommended that we always keep the shutdown behavior as a stop. In order to terminate the instance, I'll anyway show you how to terminate a specific EC2 instance in the next few minutes. And enable termination protection. So this is going to protect your EC2 instance from any accidental termination. So let's first go ahead and enable this. We'll check out about the termination protection in once the system is launched in very next few minutes. Monitoring. So by default, the monitoring on this system is available for every 5 minutes. Now, if I want a very detailed monitoring that comes with every 1 minute, then I need to go ahead and enable this. But it does say the additional charges are going to apply if I go for this detailed monitoring. So as a part of free tier, we are okay with the 5 minutes of monitoring. But however, if you want a very detailed monitoring, you can go for the enhanced monitoring, we call it as. And the tenancy is basically whether you want to have a shared hardware or whether you want to have a dedicated hardware. So specifically, all the instances that we launch as a part of free tier will be on a shared hardware. So if I go for the dedicated hardware, right, so it is going to cost me a little bit. Now, what's the dedicated hardware and a shared hardware? So usually the how does the cloud data centers appear? So let me show you one specific diagram here. Yeah, so this one, let's see. So these are different racks they have, and inside this we have few more, right? If you see, these are all the servers. So most of the times the racks will be defined based upon the shared or the dedicated. Like some companies would say that they want to go for dedicated hardware, right? Which means this complete rack would be specifically for launching the resources for that specific company itself. No other company will have any specific access to go ahead and get inside this specific rack. When we are talking about the shared hardware, this may be used by me, this can also be used by you guys. So if you are also launching an EC2 instance in your AWS console, maybe we have launched the instances in the server, which is here. Maybe I have launched in here, you guys have launched in here, or maybe we both would have launched the same hardware itself, right? So we never know. But anyway, in terms of sharing the hardware also, you're not going to share the data because that is completely secured with the help of firewall. But still, the companies where they require very heavy security, they would specifically look out for the dedicated hardware. On the free tier, yes, we get only the shared hardware, so we are going to make use of that shared hardware itself. So here it does say if you go for dedicated tenancy, it is going to apply for the additional charges, right? So this was about the step number 3. So in the step number 3 specifically, we are going to configure shutdown behavior as a terminate. You are saying, Rahul, are you talking about the shutdown behavior to be terminate? No, there is no specific charge as such. But this is just to help us with a behavior, whether you want to have a behavior with a stop or terminate. It's better always to have a stop because sometimes you may also want to stop your machines. Now, let's say if you are a company where your application should run only during the business hours, right? From morning 9 to evening 9. So rest of the 9, that is rest of the 12 hours, you can still save the cost. So basically you would only stop the machines. So you're going to significantly save the cost while you're going to stop it across. So 12 hours of working, 12 hours of non-operational mode, you can actually save the cost. So actually in our current premises where I work for a client called Aviva, which is a life insurance company, so we do have a lot of servers where we actually switch it off when they're not required at night time, because unnecessarily we are incurring the cost for them. So I would usually suggest the stop behavior to be available, because if stop behavior is available, then I'll be able to stop the machines at the night, and again at early morning 9 in the on the next day, again we'll switch on the servers. So this was the step number 3, where we actually configured how many instances I would like to have, whether it is going to be a part of spot instance or not. And specifically, we are talking about the network area. So we are going to choose default VPC, and we are going to launch this instance in the AP South 1A availability zone. And then I have auto assign public IP. So automatically a public IP should be assigned to this so that we will be able to connect to this. Now, in terms of subnet, you can also leave it as no preference. So when you talk it as a no preference, it is automatically going to choose any of the availability zone for you and get it launched. And IAM role, currently we do not have any, or we are going to learn about it in the next upcoming sections. Shutdown behavior as a stop, termination protection I'm going to enable. We are going to see once the instance launches, how is it going to protect us. Monitoring, currently we are happy with the normal monitoring that we are going to get through. Tenancy is basically the shared tenancy. And if I go for T2 unlimited, so here this is a new option that has been come across. Enabling T2 unlimited allows the applications to burst beyond the baseline for as long as needed at any time. Okay, so this is basically more about the sysops part, where we can actually burst the capacity of solid state drives in terms of IOPS. So Currently we'll ignore this, and in advanced detail section we have a part called as user data, where actually I can go ahead and put my bootstrap script. Again, we are going to have a detailed lab on what is a bootstrap script, how I can make a use of this user data. So let's proceed to the next step, that is step number 4 of adding the storage. So now if I go back to my computer diagram, so we have successfully chosen the step 1, that is operating system, step 2 where we have CPU and the RAM, step 3 where we have the network access card, and now the step 4 is basically about the hard disk storage. So we learned in detail what are the different types of block based devices, right? So we have GP2, IO1 and magnetic. Remember, SC1 and ST1 cannot be used as a root volume where I can install the operating system. So that's why they are not appearing here. And as a part of free tier, anyway, you're going to get 30 GB of SSD drives free, whether you go for general purpose SSD or whether you go for the magnetic. 30 GB is free. So I'll make use of general purpose SSD itself in this case. And then if you see delete on termination, so whenever I'm going to terminate my EC2 instance, automatically this root volume is going to get deleted. So if you want that the root volume should not get deleted, then you can uncheck this option, and then your root volume will be preserved for you. However, by default the option will be selected. And encryption, currently the root volumes are not encrypted, so in case if you want to encrypt it, you may have to use third-party tools like BitLocker or something else to encrypt the root volume. Now if I go ahead and add a new volume, you see I'm able to get the options for the ST1 and SC1 as well. So there are basically 5 different types of volumes, that is GP2, IO1, SC1, ST1 and the magnetic standard. However, as a part of root volumes, I'll be able to use only GP2, IO1 and the magnetic standard, and as a part of my extra EBS volumes, this is like C drive and this is like D drive, E drive and F drive. So you can add any number of volumes that basically require for this. So here you can mention the size. So you can go up to 10. You can go up to 10 GB. You can go and say I want 15 GB. You can say I want 20 GB here. So basically these are the different drives. If the root volume is basically the C drive, then this becomes D, E, F drives, right? So currently I'm not going to add any extra volumes. I'm just happy with the root volume. So I'll just go ahead and remove them. I just wanted to show you that we will be able to see all the 5 different types as a part of the extra volume that we are going to attach it here. Now, in terms of the extra volumes that we are going to pick it up here, you see delete on termination is given as an option. So it is not going to delete the extra volumes if I'm going to terminate the instance, right? So this is still available. And encryption, I can actually go ahead and encrypt the data on this EBS, extra EBS volumes. Now, as I just said, like these SSD drives are basically measured in terms of IOPS. If it is a magnetic drive, we can measure the speed in terms of throughput. So if you go for the throughput optimized, here is going to show you the MB per second. And if you go for the SSD drives, specifically it is going to show you the IOPS. Now, if I go for provisioned IOPS, it basically shows you how much you can specifically provision. So if you want a specific case of IOPS here, then you can mention here saying that I want 1000 IOPS or 10,000 IOPS, something as such, by defining the size of the hard disk. And in case of general purpose SSD drive, we have a limited set of IOPS. Usually for every 1 GB, I'm going to get only 3 IOPS per 1 GB. So if you check out here, it does say that we are going to get only 3 IOPS per GB, right? Baseline of 3 IOPS for GB is available. But however, just for testing purposes, Amazon is giving 100 IOPS for free. So initially it is giving 100 IOPS as a free, but however, if you go ahead and say here, let's say 40, then you see the IOPS is going to become 120, which means every 1 GB is going to get 3 IOPS. That is 40 into 3 makes 120. So if I make it as 100 here, it's going to become 300 IOPS. So currently we are going to make use of 8 GB itself. We do not have any extra things. So I'll say 8 GB, and then I'll just go ahead and say next, add tags. So step number 5 is basically adding the tags. As we all know, the tags are basically for the organizing the data. So I'm just going to go ahead and put across as name my first EC2 instance, and then I'm going to go ahead. If you want, you can add some more tags here. You can just say which team you belong to. You can say that it is a part of developers team. Then you can also give your email ID, who is the owner. I'll just say owner here, and then you can go ahead and put your email ID here, right? So I'll just say like this, right? So I can go ahead and add configure security group. Now again, coming back to the diagram of computer. So we have launched we have put across the operating system. We have selected the CPU and RAM. We have selected the network access card. We have selected the hard disk drive. And the next step is finally the firewall security. So I want to secure my system. So I have to configure a security group. Now, since this is a Linux machine, I can log in into this machine only from the port number 22. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new security group. So the name of this security is going to be, I'll just say Linux security group. And then, as you all know, our Linux machines are going to operate on the port number 22, that is SSH protocol, we call it as. And currently I'm going to keep it open for the entire world. So anyone who has access to this machine, like anyone who gets the IP address of this machine along with the user ID and password, will be able to log in inside my Linux based machine. So currently I'm going to keep it open. Specifically here we can define whether it should be logged down only to my IP address of this computer, right? So you can also do that. So currently I'm going to keep it as anywhere, so anyone will be able to connect to this machine. I'll just go ahead and say review and launch. So at last page is going to give you a specific page to review all the details that we have selected. So we have selected a machine image of Amazon Linux AMI, and it is a part of free tier. And then we have selected instance type of T2 micro, which has got 1 virtual core of CPU, 1 GB of RAM. Then we just created a security group with the Linux security group, which has got SSH port at a protocol, TCP protocol with the port range 22 open for the entire world. And then instance details is basically which VPC we are going to make use of, and whether it is on demand or not. So specifically we are using the on-demand instances. And if I scroll a little more, it is going to basically show me about the storage devices, about what is the size, and then basically it is going to show me the tags that we have basically applied for it. I'm just going to go ahead and say launch. So the moment I'm going to launch a machine, it is going to ask me for a key pair. Now what is a key pair, right? Specifically to let you know, any machine that we have in Amazon AWS cloud, okay, we are specifically talking about the cloud. Apart from that, any machine, let's say if it is a Linux or Windows, how can we log in? Specifically, we require a user ID and the password. That is one way of logging in, and the second way is user ID and the key pair, right? So Amazon basically follows this method of logging into the machine. Not just Amazon, any cloud vendor would use this user ID and the key pair, because your password can get compromised, right? However, the key pair, to get compromised, it should firstly go out of your machine. Now when I'm trying to use this key pair method, I have to give the user ID and I have to pass the key pair. Key pair is basically a physical file that is on your local machine. So if you see, I have got a lot of key pairs here, which are available in my AWS account, right? So specifically, we are going to create a new key pair here, and I'm going to name it as, since it's a December month, December 1st key pair. And remember, this is the first and the last time you're going to see the option to download your key pair. So if you forget to download your key pair, then there is no way you can get inside this EC2 machine. So if you want to log in, if you want to play around inside this Linux machine, you have to download this key pair for sure. So I'm just going to go ahead and say download key pair. Remember, this is the first and the last time, so you have to go ahead and download this across. Once you're successfully downloaded here, as we can see, then you can go ahead and say launch instance. So there we go. Our first EC2 instance is specifically now launched across, and we will be able to log in into this Linux machine in just a couple of minutes. So if you see, I have now come down to the instances part here. Earlier we were on dashboard. If you want to see your running instances, click on this instances section, and you will be able to see the instance which is running. Currently it is in running mode. That's great. That's very fast. I'll just go ahead and pick up this IP address. Now, in order to log in into this machine, I basically require the IP address and the user ID and the password. Specifically, we require IP address plus. You can use any of this method, user ID and the password, or user ID and the key pair. Since we are on the AWS cloud or any cloud model will follow this method, so I would require user ID and the key pair here in this case. So we already have the IP address. So IP address is here. Now, what is the user ID? Let we'll come to the EC2-user. This is the user ID that we are going to use. So for all the Amazon Linux-based machines, we are going to use EC2-user as a user ID, and the key pair is something that we have already downloaded. Right? The name of the key pair is December 1st key pair. Now, since we are using a Windows laptop or a Windows computer, I have to convert this key pair file. So usually whatever we download it. Let me show you the downloaded file. Okay, if you see, this is with the file extension of .pem, right? So this is the file. I'll just go ahead and safely put it across in my E drive where I have stored all the key pairs. Okay, so this is now basically of the type. Yeah, so there is simple first key pair. This is now with the extension .pem, right? So, however, when I want to get inside this Linux-based machine, I would require a file of format ppk because we are using a Windows laptop or a Windows computer. So if you are using a Windows laptop or a Windows computer, you would specifically require a file format of ppk. But what we currently have PEM. Now I'll have to convert that PEM file to ppk. So the step number one is now how do we convert this file? Specifically, we have a software with the name Patigen, which is basically helping us to convert the file from the PEM to ppk. So let's go ahead and get that software. So it's very easy to download. I just go down to the Google and just say I would like to download. Just say putty download. Just a second, guys. Okay, so you just go down and put on the putty download in your Google, and you will be able to see the second link that comes with the Chiark. Just look for this name, that is Chiark. That is the safest place to go ahead and download your putty terminals. Or you can also go to putty.org. I specifically go for this one, which is very easily helps us to locate it. So just scroll the page a little down and you will be able to see that the first file putty.exe is something that we are going to download. And apart from that, there is something called as puttygen.exe. Here it is. So these are the two files which are required. So depending upon your system configuration, whether it's a 32-bit or a 64-bit, you can download the file. Now, if you're not sure about what is the operating system you have, 32-bit or 64-bit, just click on your computer and then right click and then say properties. You will be able to see whether it's a 64-bit operating system or a 32-bit operating system that you have on your laptop or a computer. So once you are sure about the operating system bits, you can go ahead and download a specific software depending upon the requirement. So I have downloaded 64-bit puttygen.exe and I also have a 64-bit putty.exe software already installed in my machine. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up this puttygen.exe from here. So I'm going to go ahead and click file load private key. So I'm going to go down to my key pair where I have just kept it across in Pawan account. So currently, if you see, I'm not able to view the file because it is showing all the files with the PPK format. So I'm just going to click on here and say all files I want to see. And December 1st key pair.pem file, I have just selected this. And then I have to click on save private key. So that it is going to ask you, are you sure you want to save this key without a paraphrase to protect it? Yes, just say yes. And then I'm just going to give the name as again the December 1st key pair and remove the extension here. Automatically this is going to get saved as ppk. Just go ahead and save this. Now let's go ahead and check whether it is saved or not. I'll go to key pair, common account. There you see the ppk file has been generated. So that is the first step that you have to do, convert the file. Now the second step is basically with the putty software. Now I already have a putty software here in my computer. I'll just open it up. So this is the one. So in this, I basically need to give the IP address of the machine. So we already have the IP address. And then it is going to ask you for the key pair. Where are we going to pass? The key pair is basically given in the auth section. So in the SSH auth, you're going to give the key pair. That is private key file. So that is a ppk file. And then I'm going to say open. Right? The moment you're going to open, so it is asking you to verify the key fingerprints. Whether the key pair is correct or not, it is just asking you to verify it. I'll just say yes. And now it's going to ask me the login name, that is EC2-user. So there we go. This is our first Linux machine, which we have successfully launched on the AWS cloud, and we are able to log in inside it. So any questions or queries here from any one of you? Shiva, Rahul, Kirti, Divya? No, as a part of our free tier, we are going to get 750 hours of free usage. So you can run one Linux instance for 24 hours, 7 days a week for one complete month. So you are not going to be charged anything, even if you are keep it in running mode for 24 hours, 7 days a week, up till 1 month. No charges are going to happen because one day has got 24 hours. So if you're going to run it every day for one single month, so 30 days you are going to run it for 720 hours. However, we are going to get 750 hours as a free. So if your month is about 31 days like December, so still you will be as a part of free tier itself. You are not going to cross any limits. Any more questions or queries? Divya, Kirti, Rahul, Shiva, are you guys able to follow the session of the EC2 instance launch? Thanks all. So we'll close the session for the day here. We'll connect back again to explore a few more things on the EC2 section yet. And in the meantime, you guys can go ahead and look out to practice how to launch your first Linux based machine. Remember, if you can this specific diagram, this will actually visualize what are the different steps actually required. So even when you go for a specific interview or any other case, if you just remember this diagram, you can easily relate what an EC2 instance basically requires as a part of configuration: operating system, CPU, RAM, hard disk storage, network access card, and the firewall security, the most important components of any basic computer. So thanks all. We'll close the session for the day here, and we'll meet back tomorrow again at the same time to explore the next part of our EC2 section. Have a great day. Bye all.